Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again with another guide video. And today's topic is going to be focused on a mechanic that I think is one of the least understood in the game, but is also going to be one of the most important to actually figure out as we progress further and further into 3.0 in Lehigh Roy, because that's going to be Toon Break. And the goal of the guide for today is to actually break down how this mechanic works, and perhaps most importantly of all, how you can make use of it in your gameplay to both optimize your rotation and find new combos. So without further ado, the best way for us to get a rundown of this mechanic is, ironically enough, to not actually, read through all like the different manuals, all the things that are in game. The best opportunity that we'll have to actually look at this is to just try it out for ourselves. So where we're going to be going right now is just the Tower of Adversity. It's, in my opinion, the best setting for you to be able to actually experiment with this mechanic. So we'll just be posting ourselves up in floor 4 of the TOA. And the team that we're going to be using over here for our demonstrations is, of course, going to be one that I think is great to use because it's actually going to feature Lene, who is the main character when it comes to Toon Break, at least at the start of 3.0. So without further ado, let's go ahead, let's get on into this gameplay over here and break down everything that's going to be going on. So when it comes to Toon Break, it works like this. As you attack an enemy with basically any attack in a character's kit, you will build up this off-tune meter in the top left. And once that meter is full, you'll gain access to a special attack. But what you're seeing over here is that I'm doing all this stuff on Lene, but it's building up really slow. That's because things like basic attacks, so on and so forth, aren't actually a great way to get it done. You want to use some of the hardest hitting moves in a character's kit. So let's just go ahead, let's switch on over to a different unit, actually do a full team's rotation, and then see how fast this meter actually starts breaking down. So you're seeing over here, we're just on Shorekeeper getting our rotation done. Got it done really fast, but still not a lot being done over here on the off-tune side. Okay, definitely did not mean to press that, but whatever. Yeah, we just opened up the utility menu for a second. But now that I'm using more and more of Lene's attacks, right? And especially this one over here, that big boom, that did quite a big chunk of damage. And when I go into my Yuno over here, and then I start blasting off more of her attacks, especially this liberation hit, get ready for this one. You're going to see that off-tune meter, right? Has fully built up. And now that we're on field, right? We're now going to gain access to this F key. And then we can use that Toon Break attack. And you can see that did a nice little chunk of damage over here. That's essentially how the mechanic works. Then it goes on cooldown, as you can see. And once that cooldown is over, you'll be able to Toon Break again. That's just a very basic rundown of the mechanic. And as you can see, you typically trigger one Toon Break every single rotation. And the idea is that your main DPS, the one that's on field the most and doing the most damage, is going to do the most damage to the Toon Break bar. And then once that's triggered, you'll use that attack, break some additional vibration strength, and of course, depending on the units on your team, deal some additional damage. So now that we've seen how the mechanic works, let's talk a little bit about how it scales, because there are two main stats that Toon Break works off of, and you can probably guess what impacts what. So the very first stat when it comes to Toon Break, it's going to be your Toon Break boost. And as you can see over here, Toon Break boost increases your Toon Break damage, and it also increases your damage dealt to interfere targets. We'll talk about what interfere targets are later on. There's also another stat called your off-tune buildup rate, which essentially makes the off-tune meter build up faster the higher the stat is. And one thing about these stats is that they're not actually obtainable in-game from like echoes, stuff like that. They're obtained from character kits. And as you can see over here, some characters have a baseline Toon Break boost of 10. Lene has that, and I'm pretty sure Mornier will have that as well. Older units, or essentially non-Lehigh Roy units, don't have any Toon Break boost built in at all, but they still have the same off-tune build-up rate of 100%. So as you can see over here, Lene's boost is relatively minor, of being only 10. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. Lene actually has a buff built into her kit, where she actually increases Toon Break boost across the entire team by 40 for 30 seconds after she uses the biggest nuke in her kit. And as you can see over here, 40 is a lot more than the 10 base that 3.0 units are going to have. So they do have a bit of a small advantage when it comes to dealing more tomb break damage. And you can probably guess, right? If you have Lene on your team, she's going to have 50 while your other characters have 40. So maybe she's the best unit to trigger that F, you know, the F input, the tomb break attack with. Those are just some additional complications there. However, there is going to be another boost coming later in 3.0 when it comes to the off-tune build-up rate. Because, well, we've got a second unit. And when it comes to Mornier, we don't have the full details on her kit, but we do have the full details on something like her Sonata set. And as you can see over here, healing an ally increases the attack for Resonators in the team based on their current off-tune build-up rate. She's probably going to buff that because Lene has a Sonata set that increases her teammates' attack based on their tomb break boost. And, well, she buffs that. So you can probably guess what's going on over here. So those are going to be the overall specifics just when it comes to activating, triggering, and of course making use of Tomb Break. But there are going to be some additional complications over here when it comes to actually using it in combat. And the first instance that I'm just going to be showing you over here is actually going to be reusing that exact team that we just used, because it's a great way for us to look at it. Also, before we get into some of the live gameplay demonstrations, I realize there's one last area that I missed, and it's actually probably one of the most important ones. So let's just go ahead and take a look at Lene's kit real fast. Another big part of the tune system, and perhaps the biggest part, is actually going to be the resonance mode differences. And resonance modes basically operate in these ways. If you're in tune rupture mode, when you tune break an enemy, every character in rupture mode is just going to go ahead and deal a bit of nuke damage to the target. You can see over here the amount of nuke damage that it is. It typically is around 60 to 70k extra per break. Pretty decent overall. However, when you're in the other resonance mode, you instead do something different. You inflict tune strain shifting. And essentially, when enemies are under the effect of tune strain shifting, well, you remember that tomb break boost stat we talked about before? You'll see a little bit of additional details here. Whenever Lene attacks an enemy with Tune Strained interfered on them, she's going to increase her damage to the total target based off her Tune Break boost. And as you can see, there's a stack limit that gets increased by the number of 3.0 characters that are on your team that can also respond to it as well. So to just sort of break it all down, Tune Strained at the current moment is kind of fucking useless because you want 3 teammates who also respond to Tune Strained to actually get any benefit at all from this buff. And so when Lene is the only person at this point in 3.0 that can respond or even trigger this, well, you're going to have some bigger issues. Lene also has the unique ability to be the one that inflicts Tune Rupture or shifting. Other characters, like Mornier, can only respond. So they can deal their rupture damage. They can also boost damage through Tune Strain interfered. But if Lene is not on the team, you can't even like inflict and respond to it in the first place. So do keep that in mind. Inflicting is really important. But for the sake of these gameplay demos, like I mentioned before, Tune Strained is kind of useless because I don't have other Tune Strained responders. So Rupture's actually the best way to go for Lene in 100% of situations right now. There's actually no situation where you want to use this side. You gotta wait until other characters actually release. So, yeah, that's why we're gonna be using Tune Rupture, and that's why you're gonna see some additional nukes of Spectro damage every time we Tune Break the enemy. So, now let's go ahead. We've gotten that last bit figured out. Now let's talk about the actual use cases in combat, because there are a lot. And if there's any part of the video that you should be paying attention to for your gameplay, it'll be this part. So let's just go ahead. Let's talk about the first application over here. And that's going to be countering big enemy attacks. So after Crownless on this floor gets broken once, he does a special move. Editor, let's just skip ahead until when he does it. So we have just broken Crownless a single time. You can see his off-tune meter is basically completely empty. But you'll notice something that'll happen in just a second over here. Crownless is going to do something called his special attack. And when he does this attack, he becomes a bit of a menace. Okay, he's not really doing it yet. It should happen soon. Did we just skip it? Anyway, okay, here we go. Here we go. So, you're going to notice over here, right? A prompt popped up even though his Tomb Break meter wasn't full. And that's what happens when you're able to counter those special red attacks that enemies like Crownless can do. Because in the past, well, If that wasn't interruptible, the guy would just be in the air for like 30 seconds, and you wouldn't be able to do anything unless you were using a ranged character to hit him. And it was really annoying in combat. But now you have a direct counter for it. That Tomb Break opportunity is going to trigger every single time that attack occurs, but it will only pop up for a few seconds. So just make sure you're ready for the prompt the second you see a red glow, because that prompt is going to be popping up soon, and if you don't hit it, you will get cooked. Now, let's talk about the final piece over here when it comes to Tomb Break. And this is going to be one of my most favorite parts, and that's going to be interruption of enemy abilities. So, what you'll see in this gameplay over here is me properly, this is actually an unreleased video. What you'll see in this gameplay over here is me properly tomb breaking an attack to cancel an enemy animation. Watch this. So, the Lampy Lumen is currently in an attack sequence where he cannot be tomb broken at all. This is what we call like a locked attack. You can't interrupt it, it's just in there, try your best to deal damage during it, and of course dodge the attacks. However, there's one attack this Lampy Lumen does right after this that is interruptible. And if you don't interrupt it, you get cooked. I interrupt it perfectly on time. And so I don't have to deal with the attack. Here's what it looks like when you don't interrupt that attack properly. And this is in the new endgame, by the way. Here's gameplay of what it looks like.
Don't you worry.
Wait, did he get knocked down and then make a fucking zone? And this is the tomb break that people are telling me to hold? I am told by my chat to hold this tomb break, right? Because they know the Lampy Lumen's about to use the super annoying attack. So I do that, right? And this is this next rotation. But you're going to notice that I hold my tomb break for a little bit too long. And this is what happens when you hold it for too long. Hey, but hey, if he's doing the jumps, that's fine. Look. I use it. But because the boss is in a very, very annoying animation that I should have canceled earlier, that I did in the final gameplay, I do the tomb break, but I get knocked back by his attack still, and the rotation is basically ruined. But in this gameplay over here, where I decided to tomb break him immediately the second the prompt became available, well, would you look at that, guys? He just never even does that charging attack. And the crazy thing is that this charging attack leaves ice on the ground that inflicts glacial chafe to you. So if you don't cancel it, this run is basically almost impossible. That's going to be the section when it comes to interrupting attacks, and of course making sure that you're optimizing some of your rotations in your runs, right? Because if you don't do those attacks, you just simply can't do your rotations and you'll be losing a shit ton of DPS. Now, let's talk about my favorite part. And this is going to be combos. Because one of the craziest things about Tomb Break is the fact that it allows you to actually shorten some of your rotations and try out new combos. And one of the best ways to actually show this is to simply use this team over here. And my goal isn't to actually use Lene, she's just for the demonstration purposes, but you'll see what's going on. Basically, I'm going to use a Tomb Break to fast forward my Carlotta's rotation. So we're just going to be walking through, doing a very like typical thing on Shorekeeper and Lene over here. And let's just get all of that good concerto. And of course, do like a rotation on Carlotta. Just so that we, you know, actually break this guy's tune bar. So, this is what we'll be doing here. We're not going to bother with actually tomb breaking this guy here, because I want to show you how we can shorten Carlotta's rotation. Alright, so you're seeing over here, he has a full tomb break bar. I intentionally decided not to use it. I'm making the trade-off over here of delaying my next tomb break for the benefit of doing this. So once again, we're holding this tomb break for a really long time. That's because I want to do this. What did I just do there? I just skipped this entire animation. Look at this. I just skipped that entire jump up and then plunge down. Because the second that Carlotta uses this, like the second part of her E hits, she gets her forte. And I'm only using her E to get her forte. And so, the second it hits, right, I trigger a Tomb Break once I see that it's full. And I have just saved like a second, maybe a second and a half in her rotation. That is one of the trade-offs of either delaying your Tomb Break or, you know, inputting it in a way so that Tomb Break pops up at that specific point. You can actually use it as a way to immediately reach the ground from like any elevation. And when you know there are characters that have some delays in their kit from their aerial moves, that's crazy. So here's another example of me putting that mechanic into play. This team over here is going to be, it's going to be a Chuyan. It's going to be like a Chuyan, team. And this is another example of a team that can heavily benefit from that. And the reasoning that I'll give you is really simple. Chuyan, when he's played as a main DPS, really likes using this heavy attack over here, right? Thus spoke the blade, all that goodness, right? You'll notice, wow, to sacrifice only does 217% damage. That's not very much. That's pretty bad for an attack, 217%. The first hit, however, appears to deal 91.44 times 5. That's like 450 plus. It's almost double the damage of this ability. And if you're playing Chuyan as a main DPS, you want to do the most damage possible. Let me show you what it looks like when you try to fit in two of those nicer looking attacks into a rotation. And we'll just do like actual gameplay over here just to demonstrate it for you. So I'm just gonna be building up my forte, right? I got it. This is the attack that does the most damage, right? I would have to plunge in between each cast, right? To use that properly. That's kind of annoying, isn't it, right? Because this attack, a cost for it doing so much damage is that it puts him up in the air. And if you can get interrupted too pretty easily, right? But to follow up on it, if you don't use the second hit of your forte, you have to plunge, and that's a massive DPS loss. But what if we were able to find a way to skip that plunge? Let's test it out. Let's just see it. So we're going to do this first rotation, right? Really easily. Or we're just going to do the very simple first rotation over here. But now you're going to notice something, right? Check this out. Huh. So what we just saw was me use a Tomb Break to immediately get to the ground after casting the first part of Thus Spoke the Blade. I skip the plunge, and I can immediately use the first part again. So, remember what I talked about before when it came to those motion values? I am basically, by inputting in that tech, I can almost double the damage of that combo. Or at least this final hit, right? By replacing this final hit that only does 217 with one that does 450. With no loss at all in my timing. And that's only possible because of how Tomb Break works. Now, let's get into what is probably going to be the most practical application for Tomb Break over here. And that's actually going to feature a team that's very popular that a lot of people are likely going to have. And it's going to feature Arrow Rover. And you'll probably like this tech the most because it involves making Arrow Rover feel like less shit to play. So we're just going to do like regular rotations on Rover, right? It'll just be like a typical rotation at first. Nothing too crazy over here. On the second rotation, though, is when we're going to be able to get some spice. I will say, this team kind of builds up off-tune really slow. So now, we're going to go on Rover, right? That was a plungeless Arrow Rover rotation, boys. You didn't need a plunge, but the problem with that is that I guess you don't generate enough concertos, so maybe you do want to plunge. You saw what was going on over there, right? That's another way for us to, you know, shorten the team's rotation, right? Oh, we even weave in like the crownless break combo into there too, right? You can see how this mechanic is going to add a lot more fun to the way that you're playing your existing teams. And I think to me, the part that really makes this one stand out the most is how it's allowing you to greatly differentiate your gameplay and unlock those other optimizations, right? Even in your older teams. And so, naturally, right, maybe the ultimate guide to Tomb Break isn't the best title for this video, but it's the best guide that we can have right now. And we'll definitely be releasing more and more content, actually exploring more of like the rupture and the strain mechanics, which, you know, we did spend a little bit of time on with Lene. But the fact of the matter is that we simply will not be able to see the full potential of this archetype and all these mechanics over here until the units actually release, because I'm just gonna be real with you over here. This part might as well not exist with the cast of characters that we currently have. But for now, in its current implementation, I feel like Tomb Break is something that every single team can benefit from. It's about figuring out where in the team a Tomb Break is used at the best time. Because some teams, right, probably with a Lene on them, just want a Tomb Break off cooldown so that you can trigger this rupture damage as much as possible. Because otherwise, if you delay your next Tomb Break, well, you're delaying the next buildup, and you're delaying your DPS from Tomb Break. But for other teams, like Shuyan made DPS, or maybe like a Carlotta or something, right? Maybe you want to hold onto it to either literally increase your rotation's damage, or to shorten it, which would also increase its DPS, because you're dealing the same amount of damage in less time. The fact that this mechanic can be used in this many ways, and already has use cases for older members, and the use cases for older members are arguably better than for Lene, I'm gonna be honest. I think Kuro did a great job with this one, and I'm just excited to see more and more applications of it in the future. Because you want to know what, guys? I haven't even scratched the surface with this. Those are just 3 examples and just 3 teams. There are probably way more that people could do. You know, think about like Camellia's and like her, I don't know, like think about Camellia and like canceling the end lag of her ephemeral. Camellia, because she sometimes has to do plunges in her rotation because she, you know, can launch herself into the air. What if you just Tomb Break right after ephemeral and you don't have to plunge down to the ground and delay your damage that way? Already an idea for you there. The sky is truly the limit when it comes to this mechanic, and I urge you, if you haven't yet, think about new and interesting ways to weave it into your rotation, and I guarantee you'll be having a lot more fun with this game's endgame with that factored in. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.